Thank you, thank you, thank you. God, thank you all for getting up and coming out to this, and thanks to Creative Mornings for having me. If you will all humor me for a moment, I would like to show you a video that I found on a site called YouTube. I hope you like it.
Harlem Shake.
Okay, so I want to just take you down the rabbit hole to unravel what we just saw. So obviously, Harlem Shake video, there are hundreds of thousands of these now. This is the top 100 all at once. The first one was uploaded on February 4th, and by February 10th, there were 4,000 being uploaded per day. And this is a perfect meme. It is incredibly easy to contribute. It's, it's one cut, 2 scenes, and 1 sample. And that sample, all of them use, without permission, is the first 30 seconds of this song. So I'm gonna guess that nobody here has heard anything beyond the first 30 seconds. I had not. It's actually not that bad. Yeah, I'd heard the first 30 seconds like 500 times. So Harlem Shake was released in May of last year by Henry Bauer Rodriguez, or just Bauer. And he's a 23-year-old DJ in Brooklyn. And it stayed mostly unknown until last month. Now, to create the song, Bauer sampled vocals, again, without permission or clearance, from this song, created 10 years earlier in 2001.
Shake, 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 shake. So I can sell your Michelob, he can sell your cell phone. Rap about minute plans, nights and weekend. Put us on your TV, sell your cell phone.
So this is Plastic Little, also from New York. And you can hear the drums in this song were sampled from this 1970s break. It's remixes all the way down. So if you follow pop music, which I don't, barely, you'll know that Harlem Shake is huge right now. It has been #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 for 5 straight weeks. And that's without any significant TV or radio airplay. That's historic. Fader magazine interviewed Jason Musson of Plastic Little, who's the voice sampled by Bauer, and asked him how he felt. Was he angry that Bauer sampled his work without permission? He's like, no, I'm cool with it. It's what our artists do. So let's look at the video part now. The video that I first showed was created in Minecraft. Now, Minecraft is the most successful indie game of all time, created by a single Swedish programmer originally. It sold 30 million copies across all platforms. It made $240 million last year alone. It's very popular, very successful, but it did not appear out of thin air. It was heavily inspired by this game, much lesser known, Infiniminer. So that's an indie game by Zach Barth. He was the first to develop that kind of 3D block breaking mechanic that's found in Minecraft. But even that did not spring from nowhere. Zach was inspired to make that game from a free Flash game called Motherlode, which let you reshape a landscape by drilling for materials. A gaming blog called Rock Paper Shotgun interviewed Zach and asked him, are you upset you didn't get a piece of this Minecraft pie? And this is what he said. He said, the act of borrowing ideas is integral to the creative process. There are games that came before Infiniminer. There are games that will come after Minecraft. That's just how it works. So to sum up, we have a video inspired by videos that sample a song, that samples a song, that samples a song, made in a game inspired by a game, inspired by a game. And there's nothing weird or unusual about this. This is how all art and culture is made, by taking the works that we love and building upon the ideas of those people that we admire. And nobody is immune here. The idea of the lone artist and inventor struck by lightning with an idea is a myth. And all of the most creative people that we love worked this way. So there's this amazing video series, Everything is a Remix. Highly recommend checking it out if you haven't seen it, by Kirby Ferguson. And he digs deep into this topic. I want to show a clip where he breaks down the films that George Lucas borrowed to make Star Wars.
Star Wars plays much like an updated version of Flash Gordon, right down to the soft wipes and the opening titles design. From Kurosawa, we get masters of spiritual martial arts, a low-ranking bickering duo, more soft wipes, a beneath the floorboards hideaway, and a boastful baddie getting his arm chopped off.
You just watch yourself. We're wanted men. I have the death sentence on 12 systems.
And it's not like Kurosawa invented those ideas either. That last film with the arm getting chopped off, that's Yojimbo, that was based on 2 books by Dashiell Hammett that he also adapted without permission. Walt Disney did this constantly, borrowing from the public domain for some of Disney's best loved animated films over and over. He built an empire on the work of others, and then the company continued to make sure that no company after them would ever be able to profit from the public domain. And Apple, considered one of the greatest innovators of the modern era, but Steve Jobs borrowed the GUI and the mouse from the Xerox Star and put it in the Lisa and later the Macintosh. So it has always been this way, and there is nothing wrong with this. It's how culture is created. But with the internet came 2 fundamental changes. One, easy access to all media ever made. And 2, the ability to publish your work instantly, freely to a global audience. Now those 2 changes have resulted in the biggest explosion of creativity in human history, which would all be fantastic and wonderful if it weren't for one thing: copyright. But before we get into that, let's go back to our Harlem Shake example for a minute. So if you pull this video up on YouTube and look at the description, you'll see a funny turn of phrase: no copyright intended. So when you notice this for the first time, you start seeing it appear everywhere. It's all over YouTube. I see it constantly now on cover songs, mashups, remixes, even straight up unedited TV clips. These are just some of the variations that I found only on Harlem Shake videos. Okay, so you have people saying, I don't own the music. This is just a simple mix, no copyright intended. These clips belong to their respective owners. All rights go to Baio. We own no rights to the music. And then sometimes they'll even paste in parts of the copyright code related to fair use, combined with no copyright infringement intended, like that, And fair use notice. This one says, the writers and producers of the song Harlem Shake have encouraged people to spoof their song. So they're saying, yes, this is fine. These last two are great. I don't own Harlem Shake, and I'm not posting this for commercial objectives. I just upload this for sharing fun I had with friends. This one says, I don't own the song, so don't sue me, please. I've got like $13 in the bank. So there's something so charming about this to me. To me, it just feels so sincere. Like, they don't claim copyright. They don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. They just want to put their stuff on the web. And when I used to see these, I would laugh at how badly people misunderstand how copyright works. If you wade into the YouTube support forums, it gets better. You can see people confused because their video was blocked, even though they said no copyright intended. Or they had their audio removed, even though there was no intentional infringement. It says it right there. It wasn't intentional. And sometimes you just find people trying to find the best wording for the disclaimer, like the perfect voodoo charm to ward off the evil spirits. But of course, nobody will ever see them. No matter how persuasive your argument is, the copyright holder will never see it because all infringement is detected by machines. YouTube's Content ID. A Content ID is amazing. The more you dig into this, it's insane. It can even detect, this blew my mind, it can detect the underlying melody of a cover song. So that's something that Shazam and apps like that can't do. So YouTube tries to educate people about infringement. They have this thing called Copyright School that they send people to when they get a strike on their record, kind of like driver's school when you get a ticket. It goes over all the easy stuff, like not uploading movies and TV shows, but mashups and remixes are much trickier. So I want to show you a clip from it, and keep in mind this is not a parody. This is Google's best attempt at teaching people about the legality of remixes.
Oh, Russell, your reuse of Lumpy's content is clever, but did you get permission for it? Mashups or remixes of content may also require permission from the original copyright owner, depending on whether or not the use is a fair use. In the United States, copyright law allows for the fair use of copyrighted material under certain limited circumstances without requiring permission from the owner. Under the law, determinations of fair use take into account the purpose of the use, the nature of the copyrighted work, the amount and substantiality of the work used in relation to the work as a whole, and the effect of the use upon the potential market for the copyrighted work. Other jurisdictions may have similar copyright provisions protecting fair use or fair dealing. If you are uncertain as to whether a specific use qualifies as a fair use, you should consult a qualified copyright attorney.
And it ends right there. So that is the best that they can do. They are telling 15-year-old kids, they give them a crushing wall of text and tell them to go get a copyright attorney before uploading their Twilight remix. But that is because fair use is really, really complicated. And I want to tell you a little story to show you what I mean. So this story starts with Kickstarter. Back in 2009, I'd been working with them for about a year. First as a technical advisor and a board member, later as the CTO, helping them hire the technical team, get the site off the ground. And so it had launched 2 weeks earlier at the end of April 2009. And I'd been casting around trying to think of a project idea, something I could use to test the site out with. Now, I'd had an idea that I'd been sitting on for a while at that point. And you will either think that this is a great idea or it is the worst idea you've ever heard. Nobody seems to be in the middle. So here it is. This is Miles Davis performing So What, the first track off of Kind of Blue. Now, Kind of Blue is not like other jazz albums. It is the best-selling jazz album of all time. It's the most critically adored jazz album of all time. It is a perfect album. Recorded live with only 2 extra takes. I know every note of this album, backwards and forwards. I love this album. So the 50-year anniversary of Kind of Blue was coming up, and I had an idea. Let's take the warm, emotional, improvisational sounds of the best jazz album of all time and combine it with this. Video game music, right? Chiptunes. Look, these are 2 genres that I love, right? Because at that point, nobody had ever tried to make chiptune jazz. There just wasn't that much, cross-genre experimentation going on. and I wanted to know what it would sound like. So with that, Kind of Bloop was born. A full-length, track-by-track, 8-bit tribute to Miles Davis's Kind of Blue. But it was going to take money. I'm not a musician, and I don't know how to do chiptunes, so I was going to have to hire musicians to make the album, print the CDs, ship everything, and so on. So 2 weeks after Kickstarter launched, I put it up on the site with a $2,000 goal. This project was a labor of love. I promised to give all the profit from the Kickstarter project to the 5 musicians, and it would be very, very limited edition. The only CDs printed would be for Kickstarter backers. So within 4 hours, it hit the goal, blew right past it. That's a pretty common phenomenon now, but at the time, it was a big deal. Raised around 4 times what I asked. Modest numbers by today's standards, but on August 17th, 2009, exactly 50 years after the release of Kind of Blue, I was a record producer. Kind of Bloop came out, and now I know what chiptune jazz sounds like. It sounds like this. So jazz purists hated it. But nerds like me loved it. And I think Miles actually, personally I think he would have dug it, especially during the electric period. But the 419 people that backed this project, they all got the album. I put everyone's names in the liner notes, and everybody loved it. This felt great. So, yay, right? Happy ending. Not so fast. I learned a lot about copyright while doing Kind of Bloop. So most music licensing is very hard. If you want to use a sample, you need to directly negotiate a license with the rights holder, usually a record company. Even a 2-second sample, highly distorted, was found to infringe copyright by the courts. So the end result is that sampling is extremely difficult and very expensive to do, and definitely out of the reach of most indies. An album like Paul's Boutique could never be released today. The Beastie Boys sampled the Beatles, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, and many, many more on this album. One study found that even if they'd been able to get permission now for each of these samples, which they wouldn't, it would have lost about $8 per copy with all the licensing fees taken into account. Your best bet for sampling is to sample so flagrantly that record labels are terrified to take you to court for fear of establishing a new precedent, which is basically how Girl Talk has survived. My situation was much simpler. I wasn't sampling anything. Kind of Bloop was cover songs. Now, cover songs are the only sane licensing in the copyright world. You don't need anybody's permission to make a cover song, unlike samples. Nobody can stop you. You pay a compulsory mechanical license, a small fair fee that you pay per copy. It's established in the copyright code. And you can even do it all online using a service like Harry Fox, which is exactly what I did. Before launching the Kickstarter, I did some research. It was very clear, learned how to license the songs, and then I paid Miles Davis's publisher for each copy that we sold. So that was fine. 6 months after the album came out and after the last CD was sold, I got an email from a law firm representing this guy, Jay Maisel. He's one of the great photographers of the 20th century. Jay took the iconic photo of Miles Davis for the original Kind of Blue album cover. Now for the cover art, I created a pixel art version of the original album cover. Now, if you know anything about pixel art, you'll know it's hard. It's not just a Photoshop filter. I could not do it myself, so I asked a pixel artist friend of mine to do an 8-bit version of the original album cover. So like with sampling, if you want to use an original photograph, you have to get permission from the artist, negotiate a license directly with them to use the original. But an illustration based on a photograph was not nearly as clear. I believed at the time, and I still believe, that the artwork was fair use. Maisel, or his lawyers at any rate, they disagreed. I told them I thought it was fair use, that this was a tiny side project done out of love. I immediately apologized for the misunderstanding, and I immediately removed the illustration in the places I was using it. The CDs were already gone at that point. So they responded and said that that did not unring the bell of infringement, and said that I was liable for up to $150,000 per infringement in statutory damages in federal district court, or if I preferred, they offered to settle out of court for $75,000. That's for a side project that made around $5,000. But as you saw from Google's copyright school, fair use can be very complex. The Electronic Frontier Foundation, they helped me get a lawyer, and they thought there was a strong fair use case. They said that it was commentary on the original album, clearly didn't impact the market value of the original photo, and it was a very limited commercial use. They thought the case was so strong, in fact, that they offered to represent me pro bono if it went to court. But even without attorney fees, it would take years, and my lawyers estimated it would, still be in 6 figures in discovery, expert witnesses, and other court fees just to reach a conclusion. So this is why almost every copyright case settles out of court, and there's so little actual case law. So I did too. We reached a middle ground, and I settled out of court for $32,500 of my savings. So that sucked. But I negotiated one concession, a very unusual concession in the settlement, the ability to write about it. They agreed to let me write one blog post, which they reviewed and agreed on. And I wrote that blog post in July of 2010, right as the settlement ended. And it took me nearly a full year to work up the nerve to publish it. And that was a hard year. I barely made anything, which is rough. If you've ever heard the term chilling effect, I was feeling very, very frosty. So eventually I did post it. It was a long post. I talked about the settlement, the balancing test of fair use, how fair use is limited protection for artists, and a whole bunch of examples. Honestly, I expected it would be too inside baseball for most people. I thought it would be interesting to some copyright geeks, and that was about it. I was wrong. It instantly blew up online. The album itself was very divisive. Photographers in particular were very, very upset and did not agree. The geeks, as you would expect, tended to be very supportive. The response quickly got out of hand. Supporters flooded his Facebook page with messages, and they had to temporarily delete it. The craziest thing is that someone made posters of the album art with the slogan, "All Artist Theft," and put it on his house. Now, it's not like, well, hold, So he lives in a 70-room building in Lower Manhattan. It's the largest single-family dwelling in New York, a converted bank building, the Bowery, which, as you can see, is like a magnet for street art. So it's not like someone pasted on your 3-bedroom. But I did not condone any of that. I actively asked people to leave him alone. I did not want any of that. My main hope in being able to write about it was just to warn other artists. Out-of-court settlements almost always, universally, have a confidentiality agreement preventing both parties from talking about it, which means that you never hear these stories from artists that have to do this. But I wanted everyone to learn from my biggest mistake, which is that fair use will not save you. In fact, nothing that any of you have ever made is fair use. Why? For 2 reasons. One, fair use is not a law. It's not a law. It's a test used in court. It's a framework for a judge to decide whether something is allowable infringement. And only a court can say whether something is fair use or not. And second, anyone can sue you for anything, always, anytime, even without grounds. And when they do, you will have to defend yourself. And settling out of court is almost always cheaper than a court battle, and the person suing you knows that. So I did not fully understand those 2 things until kind of bloop, and I wanted everyone else to know it. So when I see all of those copyright not intended and fair use disclaimers on YouTube, I don't laugh anymore. I start to get worried. I get worried because I love remix culture, I was the first person to put the Grey album on the web, which is DJ Danger Mouse's mashup. It was the Beatles and Jay-Z. I was the first person to get cease and desisted by EMI on it. In 2008, I coined the term supercut to refer to all those fan-made remixes that splice together, phrases and cliches, stuff like this.
Dude, his dudeness, duder, El Duderino. Dude.
And I set up a site called supercut.org that collected over 500 of these things. And every time I'd look at this and I'd be like, should these be illegal? I built a site, as Celie mentioned, to write and share text adventure games. And a lot of those build off of fan fiction staples like Doctor Who and My Little Pony. And it's being used to teach programming to kids in school, which is great. But again, should those games be illegal? There's millions of cover songs on YouTube, millions. And almost all of them are unlicensed. From Justin Bieber singing in his bathroom to Walk of the Earth covering somebody that I used to know. So many lawbreakers out there, people. And just last night, I went to go see this girl, Julia Nunes, perform. She got her start recording covers in her dorm room and putting them on YouTube. And now she's released 3 albums independently on her own. She's toured with Ben Folds, she's been on Conan. But none of that would have been possible if she hadn't been able to get her career going, breaking the law. And does it feel right that these are illegal? So every piece of fan fiction, every fan-made music video, every supercut, every mashup, I love all this stuff so much, and it worries me to think that it is technically illegal, or at least largely untested in court. The only laws broken more often than copyright are like speeding and jaywalking. But getting a ticket for speeding will not ruin your life. It'll ruin your day, right? But getting a copyright dispute and having to settle out of court for thousands of dollars or tens of thousands of dollars just might. So I can hear some of you thinking right now, nobody is suing people on YouTube making fanfic or cover songs. And you're right, for now. Content ID has staved some of them off. But the fact is, this is the thing that worries me, is that even a small settlement will make far more money than years of running YouTube ads on a video. And so what we're seeing in another part of this story is that we're in the early stages of quick settlements being used as a business model. This is not about stopping piracy at all. It started with BitTorrent, where some clever lawyers realized that they could develop software to automate lawsuits, filing them in mass against movie pirates, people just downloading films. Now the software looks up the IP address of the file share from BitTorrent. It files a subpoena with the court to order an ISP to reveal their identity, and then automated sends out settlement letters, and then wait for the checks to come in, usually in the range of $2,000 to $5,000 per person. This is big money. Now, there's no reason why these kind of lawsuits could not move to remixes, covers, fanfic, mashups, or anything else, because most of them won't be lawsuits. They'll just be settled. And it will probably work because of the way the damages work in copyright law. The law allows a copyright owner to collect actual damages that they've suffered because of the infringement, plus any of the profit taken in by the infringer. That's perfectly fine. That makes sense. If you lose money, or someone is making money directly off of your work, sure. If a court decides that makes sense. But if a court finds willful infringement, which they, would, they can also award statutory damages of up to $150,000, and it's that number. That is a terrifying, life-ruining number. If you receive one of these settlement letters, and I hope that you never do, the choice is between $150,000 per work, which may be a file, maybe a video that you uploaded, plus attorney fees in a court battle, or taking the settlement offer, whatever that is. This is exploiting copyright as a revenue model. And that is a clear abuse of its original intention. The Constitution states that the purpose of copyright is to promote the progress of science and the useful arts. It was intended to cultivate creativity by letting artists and inventors profit off of their work for a limited time. Instead, what has happened is we've criminalized some types of creativity, and like patents, we've turned copyright into a weapon. If money is not changing hands, nobody should ever feel afraid to make art that builds off of another person's work. For that reason, I think there should just be a non-commercial clause in the copyright code. And the hard part is that no amount of lawsuits or legal threats will change the fact that this behavior is considered normal. I would bet the vast majority of people, especially young people, see nothing wrong with non-commercial sharing, remix, with attribution. Or they think, as we've seen, they think it's legal already. So that's why I say that remix culture is our prohibition. We have a vocal and powerful minority, which is the record and film industries, fighting to criminalize commonplace activities from law-abiding people. We've turned every teenager with a computer into a criminal. And maybe that can work for a while. But what happens when that generation that's totally comfortable with remixing becomes a majority of the voting public instead of its fringe youth? What happens when they start getting elected to office? Because you can criminalize the commonplace. You can criminalize the ordinary activities of law-abiding people, but eventually something has to give.